Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Hello, this is Yashashvi, currently an optometrist working in Tilganga Eye Hospital, Nepal. And today, on behalf of Mr. Kapil Gautam, I will be hosting this webinar by Mero Eye Foundation. And I heartedly welcome all of you to today's webinar and thank you for your valuable presence. So I hope I'm audible to all of you. Before starting today's session, let me check out how many of us have joined yet, and we will be waiting for a few minutes to see if anyone is interested to join. And if you have any queries during the presentation, you can drop it in the chat box below, and discussion session will be conducted at the end of the webinar. So having known so much about contact lenses, optometry has witnessed the progression from the early soft lenses to RGP, from disposables to extended wear lenses. And now it is the scleral lenses. And it has been a really exciting time for this profession as advances keep coming, and scleral lenses has been a boon for patients with keratoconus, trauma, post-refractive ectasias, extreme dry eye, and also scarrings. So these lenses change lives, enabling visually compromised patients to lead a normal life. So today I would want to welcome someone who is an expert in contact lens, especially scleral lenses. And it is an honor for me and Mero Eye Foundation to again welcome Dr. Thomas P. Arnold, currently the Vice President of the Board of today's Vision Licensing Corporations, United States, and also the Fellow of Scleral Lens Education Society. Our topic for today's webinar is scleral lens troubleshooting and anterior photography. Thank you for coming us and giving us your valuable time, sir. I would want to request you to proceed with your presentations now.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to Mero Eye and you and all the people there in Nepal. I'm pleased to be here. I'm very honored to be here and share some things I've learned in the last few years. I thought I'd start off with photography. Okay, let's try this again. All right, so let's talk about photography. This is something, whether or not you fit Sclerals, everybody can do. Some of my disclosures. So Ansel Adams, very famous American photographer, said, "There's no rules, there's just good photographs." I'm still hearing a feedback of my talk, but I'll just try to go through it. So anyway, I've taken a lot of pictures. It's not my hobby. I started doing this when I had scleral lenses. Sorry, I'm still getting my recording. I'm still hearing my recording in my headphones. Okay, so I'm going to try to talk over this. These are some of the pictures I've taken. This is from contact lens spectrum and stuff. So let me spend a minute, try to teach everyone here how you can take pictures like this. A lot of these pictures were taken with just a simple iPhone 4. And the main thing about using your iPhones is you need to attach it to your slit lamp. So here are some other attachments. There's a variety of attachments that some are universal that will fit most anytime. I think what I'll do is just take off my headphones. Maybe this will work. Okay, sounds good. So I won't be able to hear you, but hopefully you can hear me. So this is an example of a universal type recorder that would accommodate most any lens. This is one actually I got recently. It's called the iPhone dock, and it works very, very well. It's spring loaded. You just slip your phone into the holder. You can adjust the height and line up the ocular, and it attaches real well. It also has an auxiliary light source, which you see here on the right. When you're taking pictures of the anterior segment, it's nice to have an extra light source in addition to your slit lamp to shine light, in the entire adnexa there. Here's another such device, a Magic Eye. Most everybody here is probably too young to remember a ruby lens, but a ruby lens is what we had before we had our 90 diopter and 78 diopter condensing lens. And it fit into the little holder you see there in the middle, right in the middle of the slit lamp where the little silver bar goes in. And that little place is in there on most every slit lamp. And usually it has a metal plate over it. And you simply remove the metal plate, and then you'll see a little column in there. And this device goes into there, and you can see it has a magnifying lens that you place in front of your objective, and holds the iPhone there. So the point being that most everybody has some sort of smartphone, and they take very, very good pictures. Now in America, we have something called HIPAA, which is the Health Information Portability Act. And what this means is that we have to be cognizant of not sharing or releasing personal information on our patients. So you may have a different standard, in your country, or may not have a standard at all, but even so, it's good to keep your patient's information separate from your general information. So I would keep everything separate. I would even go as far as to buy a separate iPhone or mobile phone for your office, and only upload to your secure network. You don't want these pictures, being able to be shared in the general public. We also get releases from all our patients to use their photographs. We get their written permission. Now, this is a device that works very well. It's less expensive than an entire slit lamp camera, but it's a little more stable than some of the holders we've just looked at. It's made by Marco, or also called Nidec, and it works very, very well. You see, it holds an iPhone, so you're still taking pictures with the iPhone, and you hook up your iPhone via Bluetooth, to whatever computer system you're using. And this little device inserts itself, or you insert it between the oculars and the objectives of your slit lamp. And you can see that there on the picture on the right. And you'll also see a toggle there, a little black toggle on the bottom. And that's how you switch the oculars to go to the camera as opposed to your eyepieces. This is made again by Marco. I forget the exact name of it. It's called an Icon or something similar, but it works very well. And you see there, it sits on the top. And so the doctor's looking at the iPhone as they take the picture, and Bluetooth into the network. And it works very, very well. We've used it in a big clinical environment. This was a meeting last year in Texas, and we had a room full of people using this. And the nice thing is we had a big computer screen at the end of the room, and we could take turns sharing our photos via Bluetooth. So it's a really nice system. I think it runs about $3,000 US, but considering the cost of an entire slit lamp, that's fairly reasonable. Now, one mistake I see that people make when taking pictures is they have a lot of vignetting. And vignetting is where you have the edges of your picture cut off. You have it cut off there. And so you can avoid this by simply putting your fingers on the screen of your iPhone. And you know how you make this pinching motion to enlarge the image or make the image smaller. So on the picture on the left, what I would do if I had that view, I would enlarge it, and you get the picture on the right. So you're not changing the magnification, you're changing the area of the photograph. And so that way it just looks better, looks more professional. It's a much better picture. Now here's another device that has several different versions. This is the portable slit lamp device, where you actually have a portable video source, not video, but light source, and a holder for your iPad in this case, and a little magnifying. So you can take this from room to room. It doesn't attach to the slit lamp. It's a handheld device, and that's called the portable eye slit. Now, a variation of that we have in our room, this is our room, is there's an attachment. You attach it directly to the slit lamp, as you see on the right. There's a little ring there. You attach a ring. You can see it on the left ocular, and then that slit lamp, or not slit lamp, but the holder for the iPad slips directly on that. You can take, movies or still pictures, and that works well. And that's called an iPhoto dock. And that works really well. Takes some really, really good pictures. These are with the iPhoto dock. Now you see these have vignetting like we described. So again, avoid that by increasing the image. Now, one thing you can do is once you take the pictures, enhance them, enhance the color, the sharpness, the color scheme, the color temperature. But I want to caution you that even though you have all these devices, the one thing they won't do is they won't make the picture sharper. So, our task as photographers are to get a sharp image. You can make it lighter, you can make it darker, you can make it more blue or more yellow or enhance the skin tones. You can do all those things with apps like this, many of which are free, but you can't make it sharper. So spend a little time really focusing in and trying to get, a good sharp image. So I was doing this for several years with the slit lamp, the old cameras, the smart cameras, smartphones. But I really was enjoying doing pictures and posting them and sharing them. So I needed a new slit lamp, wanted a new slit lamp. And so I got one that has the camera built in. Now, some of the advantages of having your camera built into your slit lamp is that you directly hook it into your computer. So it's a little bit faster than Bluetooth. It's more stable than Bluetooth. And you're running your software directly on the computer. Now, it's a little different focusing. These are not binocular focusing systems. They're monocular. We focus through the left ocular. Kind of our gross focus, but our fine focus is done actually by looking at the monitor. So you're using your joystick and using your slit lamp and get close, get as focused as you can, and then you look over to the side and you look at your computer monitor, because the image that you see on the monitor is what you're going to capture. And so on the slit lamp, there's a little button on the joystick, and you just merely press the button. So it's very, very quick. And it goes right into your computer, and you can switch back and forth between video and still pictures. So it's very, very nice. So I just took a picture of my monitor. You can see the thumbnails. So you can go through the thumbnails of the pictures that are good, discard those that are not, and save, share, upload them wherever you want. We can use this, even though we have this camera in only one of our 4 rooms. We upload the good pictures to a server, and then any computer in our office network can access that server and look at those pictures. So it's very, very useful to have. Saves you a step. So there's the camera, and like the one we saw with the Marco unit, it fits between the objective and the oculars, and that's where the camera lives. And you can see that it has some cables connecting it to the computer. Now, whether or not you have a slit lamp camera or we're using our smartphone doesn't really matter. The technique is the same. You want to dim your room lights. You don't want excessive background light. This gives you ghost images, in your photograph. For looking at scleral lenses, then when you want to assess the scleral clearance, the lens clearance, you angle your beam about 40 degrees to one side. If you're imaging the post-lens tear layer or the fluid reservoir where you've put fluorescein in, as this picture is, you use white light. You do not use the cobalt blue light. Magnification needs to be moderate. 10 to 16 is what I use. Less than that, the picture is too remote. More than that, it becomes very difficult to focus. So your camera settings, may be slightly different. Your magnification may be different, but you want this middle range, not too little, not too much. And the secret to any photographer is you take a lot of pictures. Some of them will be good, not all, but some of them. And so you want to, in talking about scleral lenses again, you want to look at several different angles so that you get a true picture. So what you do this way is you reverse the positions of the light source and the oculars. So in this picture, we have it like we discussed it just a second ago, the oculars are in the middle and the light source 40, 50 degrees to the side. But what you can do is just reverse those two. And now you get a picture like this. So you're seeing it the same eye from a different angle, and you get a different view and therefore different information. So this is what I've done here. Now the magnification is to the side and the light source is in the middle. So all you have to do is just switch the positions to look at all the different angles. They're fun to do. You can get some really good pictures like this symphony lens, interocular lens. Take some really good stuff. It's important, we'll talk about this in a second. The nice thing about the slit lamp camera is it has its external light source built in, like we talked about a few minutes ago on the iMobile, where it had the little light source. The little tube on the left is a beam, is a light. It has a rheostat, so you turn up the intensity by twisting the knob, the knurled knob you see on the top left. And then in the middle of the picture to the right, you see a little disc with a frosted window. That's called a diffuser. And when you have a diffuser, you swing that little frosted window over the mirror, which you see, kind of below center, and it diffuses the light. So you really don't get your optic section, you get a whole view, whole picture. And so when taking a picture of the whole of the eye, like you want to look at pingueculae, or you want to look at lids, you want to look at the whole adnexa, you want a diffuser. And so this is one built into the soot lamp, but you can make one on your own. If you have the Zeiss type camera, then you can just take a little cup like you see on the left. This is something we have for cough medicine in America. It's a cough syrup, and that's a measuring cup, and you can just drop that over your light source and it diffuses the light nicely. On the right, you can see we've taken a disposable lens case from a daily wear disposable, put some paper clips attached to it, and you just slip that over. So you can be creative. Some people advocate taking Scotch tape and putting it over the light source, but then you have to deal with the glue, the residue left behind, and clean it. So I think these are easier, especially the cap on the left. You just pick it up and drop it over the light source. So those are different ways of diffusing that. Now, when you do want to use your cobalt blue light, it always is helpful to use the Ratten filter. There are many types of Ratten filters. If you go online, look for Ratten filters, there's all these different bewildering numbers, but the one we use is a number 12. And in many of our fit sets now, that to encourage you to use that, they'll include a Ratten filter, or you can buy them off the internet. They're cheap. But a number 12 is what enhances our cobalt blue light the most. And it really does help take a very good picture, and especially for dry eyes and abrasions, and finding areas of fogging behind the lens where you're looking for a rivulet of tears in there. The Ratten filter is really good. Now, some topographers like this is a Zeiss topographer, have a camera system built in. It's an option, but it certainly is available. And so it's not going to take a slit lamp beam. It's not going to take an optic section. It is simply going to take the whole image. The picture on the right, though, is very useful. We can put a contact lens on the eye. And of course, because this is a placido-based or reflection-based system, the topographer is going to be looking at the contact lens, not at the eye. And so it'll image where where it thinks the edge of the limbus is. It'll image the optical center, what it thinks the iris is, but you're really imaging the optical center of the lens. And you're looking at the decentration. So it's a neat little tool. It has an inbuilt Ratten filter as well. And you can see on the bottom picture there, that's a gas permeable lens. and you get a good idea of the bearing and the centration of the lens. So you can get a topographer with the camera built in, which is a nice feature to have. Now, a lot of my pictures, especially the ones that I'm known for, are done with using a macro lens. So let's talk about macro photography. So this is with a true macro lens that you have on a handheld camera. So if you're going to do this, I encourage you to get a real macro lens, not try to take a regular lens and then put some extenders on it. Invest in a true macro lens. And by macro, I mean something that has a focal length of 100 millimeters or more, like this Canon lens. This is my camera that I use. It's a Canon 70D with that lens we just saw, and it has a unique flash system, the twin lamp flash. Many different cameras out there. Canon is what widely available. It's fairly affordable. It's a lot of accessories for a Canon, so that's why I picked it. And it's really simple to use. Nikon's an excellent camera, as are Olympus and Konica, and there's no lack of cameras out there. Fuji makes great cameras, but this is the one I got. This whole system costs about $2,800 US. So what do? When you set up your camera for macro photos, you want to use the smallest aperture possible. You are all optometrists and you understand pinhole effects and the pinhole giving us a large depth of focus. Well, that's what we want in our camera system. We want almost a pinhole effect. And the reason is, even though we're looking at something very close to us, there is a lot of depth there, going from the lids to the cornea, the conjunctiva, the iris plane, even the lens. So there's a lot of depth of field in a very small space. And so that's why you need something that's as close to a pinhole as possible. And that's your f-stop. So that's what we mean by smallest aperture, like f32. All right. The image speed, the ISO image speed is how much light do you need? And you need more than average light because you're so close and often in a darkened room. So a good place to start is 400. A very slow speed would be 60 or 100. A very fast speed would be in the thousands. You don't want it too fast. You don't want your ISO to be too fast, because if it is, if you're in 1600 or 2000, the light's very good. You can take a very quick picture with a quick shutter speed, but it's grainy. The quality of the picture will not be good. So I would start with 400. You set the image type to portrait. You want to do a manual focus, not automatic. Put on your image stabilizer. You set the magnification on the lens itself to maximum. Turn it all the way up. You focus on the center spot focus, not a whole field. And you just move in. We'll see an example of that in a moment. You just move in until it's clear, and you're focusing on the what I call the landing lights. Your flash has lights for focusing, and that's certainly what you use. And I'll show you how that works. So these are the settings. On the upper left, you see C. That means custom. So on the settings of your camera, whether it's autofocus or shutter priority, aperture priority, movie, the various functions, you want to put it on custom C. Set it up like we talked about with these readings and save it. And that way, if you want to use the camera for other things, you can switch the modes to aperture or automatic or movie, whatever you want to do. But you can always come back to the custom settings and you'll be ready to go to take your macro pictures. So again, there's your pinhole, there's your fast shutter speed. RAW means there's no processing on the image. RAW means you're getting the full file size. You're getting, it's 3 megs or something, and that way you can process it. If you process it on the camera, you can't undo that. So you save it as RAW. Spot metering, that means manual focus. And this is portrait mode, like you're going to take a picture of someone. So these are my settings on my Canon camera. A rookie mistake I made early on is, this is a macro flash. It's called a ring flash. And that's great if you're taking pictures of a flower or an insect or something very, very small. but it's not good for the eye because as you see, the image is right dead center in the cornea, right where you want to see. So this is an expensive mistake. Don't make it. What you want is something that the lamps are on the side, and we'll look at that. So this is how you do it. And you're down here. That's where your little deal is. Okay. So go ahead and run it. And does that look reasonable? Does that look reasonable? Yeah. Okay. Is that? So that's how you do it. And you take pictures like this, Scleral lens over some intacts. It's a really bad case of neo. I got most of this neo to resolve using he was in a hybrid lens that was very, very tight, and a very old lens, probably didn't give much oxygen. I refit him in a Scleral lens with a very high decay, and that I cleared up quite nicely. So just some examples of some macro pictures you can take. That's a eye print lens where we actually did the molding for we call this a proud graft or a tabletop graft, and did a mold. Now here's an example of some of the photo editors I talked about. The iPad has one, and it's very good. It's really quite good. And so that's how you determine, enhance your brightness, your color, the exposure. You can do a lot of things. Just remember, you can't make the focus better. So that's important. So one of the major features we use of this is cropping, because you don't need all this black space out to the side. You can crop it and make it look a lot better. Don't play with the colors too much, because you start fiddling with them, they get real unnatural really, really quick. This is a mucin ball of mucus that's just kind of rolled up under the Scleral lens. I've only seen one of these, but they do occur from time to time. And so these are examples of some of the changes you can make on the bottom. Those are your settings. So they're fun to play with. Excuse me, and you should play with them, but just don't get too far off base. There's things you can get, from Apple Store and Google Play, other editors that are fun to play with. Moldive is really good. I've used it for years. It's free. It's easy to use. And so with things like Moldive, then you can actually write, on the image, and you can illustrate things like you want to. So that's a good feature of that. Now the iPad has some of that, but the Moldive is a little bit better. Moldive, you can do collages and multiple pictures, and so it's free and it's fun to use. So just remember that the single most important component of the camera is the 12 inches behind it. So have fun and enjoy it. And here, I guess we can pause. I'll put back my earpiece so I can hear you, and I'll happy to take some questions before we move on to our another one.
As of now, we don't have any questions.
No questions. So okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we'll just push on then, and let's get. Uh-oh. Hang on a second.
So let's wait for a minute if you have any.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay.
No questions as of now.
Okay, well, great. Well, let's push on. And of course, I'd be happy to ask some questions at the end. Okay, I'm going to take my little earphone off so I won't be able to hear you. That way I won't get the echoing, okay? All right.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure I understand.
And sorry about Siri. Siri's didn't, sorry. Okay, let's see if I can do that. All right, let's talk about scleral lens troubleshooting a little bit. So troubleshooting is, you know, don't go looking for it because it'll find you. Okay, so my good friend Bill Potter said fitting sclerals is easy until it's hard. Okay, and I really love this quote from the great physicist Stephen Hawking. You know, the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance; it's the illusion of knowledge. And what that means is that, you know, the minute you look at something and you make a jump to a conclusion or decision without examining the whole facts, you know, you could get into trouble. So it's important, you know, to be a little humble and examine all the facts and not think you have all the answers, because the moment you do, it'll come back to surprise you. All right, now something we get that's very, very common with anybody that fits sclerals is bubbles under the lens. Now, there's two different areas that bubbles come from. They come from insertion, or they come during wear, and we'll explore both of these. Now, this is a lady that came in for her follow-up visit and obviously has a very large bubble. Now, you can tell that the fluorescein was applied after the insertion because, you know, at the follow-up, because you can see on the fluorescein pattern that the fluorescein's on the surface of the lens as well as behind the lens. And this is our technique when they come in for their follow-up. We apply fluorescein to the bulbar conjunctiva because we want to see if there's some exchange underneath. And of course, a lot of that fluorescein's on the anterior surface. So you can look at this picture and know that the lens was in the eye when the fluorescein was applied. So the problem with insertion bubbles, where they come from, is there's not enough saline in the bowl to begin with, that they're not aligned properly, they're off center, or they just jam it up into their eye. They're just applying with too much force. They're concerned that it's not going to get on the eye, and they just jam it up into the eye. So what do you do about this? Well, you always make sure that the bowl is overfilled, that you have plenty of saline in there. You insert gently, I mean, firmly. You don't have to be timid about it, but you don't ram it up into your eye. For some people need a stand to do this. Maybe they're not comfortable. Maybe they can't open their lids fully. Maybe they have mobility or issues, tremors. So they can use a stand. We encourage that. And then sometimes it's helpful to start off with 3 or 4 drops of a very viscous tear, a thick tear, something with carboxymethylcellulose or hyaluronic acid. Put a few drops of non-preserved tear in first, and then top up with your saline. Here's a gentleman who has a little homemade stand. He has essential tremors, and he actually has this little stand that he made from some sort of little plastic cup and put a hole in it, and he uses that. So you can do it homemade. Here's another homegrown thing. This is illustrating how you want to overfill the bowl. You want to have what called positive meniscus. And this was a man that came in and he lost his inserter. So he went into his garage and got these. These are actually called wire nuts, and they're used to tie 2 electrical wires together. If you have 2 bare wires and you're twisting them together, well, these are insulated little caps that you twist over the top. So I thought that was pretty creative of him. Okay, now you can get bubbles during wear, and we saw this picture earlier in our other talk. And this is where the haptic, or the landing zone, is not aligned. And maybe you have too much clearance, you have too much vault, and every time you blink, that creates a pumping action and it forces bubbles, underneath the lens. So the remedies for this is make sure you're aligned to the sclera. I use toric haptics almost exclusively, unless the lens is very, very small, like 14.9 or 14.6. Anything 15 and above, pretty much I'm going to have a toric haptic, because studies have shown that even in, quote, a normal eye has 300 microns of toricity. So align to that, and as you said, maybe decrease the vault a bit. Okay. All right. So another thing that's very, very frustrating is decentration. And you don't need fluorescein to see this. how this lens is dropping down. You see a very marked tear prism there, going from left to right, the cornea, the tear, post-lens tear layer, and then the lens itself. So the lens is really dropped. Why does it do that? It does that because our extraocular muscles insert at different distances from the limbus. Not only that, they're at different angles or elevations. And we remember this as the spiral of Talot. Okay. And another thing that a subsequent finding is that, and this is from my good friend, Dr. Christine Sent, that the limbus is oval, okay? It's not circular. In fact, it's what we call a paraboloid, whereas two meridians, and it can be either, steeper vertically or steeper horizontally, it can be either way. But the fact is it's not the same. It's fairly toric. And also the shorter chord length will be higher up. So Christine calls it, a Pringle. A Pringle is a crisp we have in America, and you may have it in Nepal, where it's a crisp, and it has this funny shape. It's just a marketing thing, but actually it's a fairly good representation of the way a lot of our limbuses look. And so this leads to something that we see a lot, where we'll have alignment, horizontally, and then we'll see this excess clearance, inferiorly, because the lens is dropping and the lens is overshooting there. And that's what the impression mold picture on your left is. And then if you see on the bottom right, the green picture, then the first little zone down here, I don't know if my mouse doesn't work, but the first little landing zone is over the temporal limbus, and then the one that extends much farther down would be inferiorly. So we don't land the same. And so that creates us problems in decentration problems. And then this is a study from a number of years ago, maybe even 10 years, done by good friends of mine, Randy Kojima and Pat Caroline. They were at Pacific University in Oregon in the United States. And they found that the angles of the sclera are different. Not only the elevation, that is the height, but the angle it makes varies widely. And the angles are what we call tangent. They're very, very straight. And we think of the eye, we think about corneal curvature, keratoconus, where the cornea gets steep and very curved. And we think of the eye as a globe. We call it a globe. We think of it as like a little golf ball or ping pong ball. But actually, when you get off the limbus and you get into the sclera, it's very straight. It's almost like a ski slope. And so it's important to try to align to that. Okay, so toric haptic we talked about, from a Greek word, haptikos, meaning to grasp. So in the case we just saw, you would steepen the haptic in the vertical meridian to keep it from dropping so much. However, that even though it's dropping, the vertical meridian may be, quote, flatter. It may be the flatter meridian as opposed to the nasal temporal meridian. But nevertheless, when the lens drops, you need to tighten it up so it has a foothold. And then different manufacturers have different widths in the haptic. So you might talk to the manufacturer and see what the width is of the lens you're using. And if you're having a problem, see if there's alternatives. Additionally, some lenses now, the haptic portion is not a curve, it is a tangent. So you'll have of course a base curve, maybe a mid-periphery curve, a limbal curve perhaps. But then when you get into the haptic, they're very straight, more like a ski. So again, this varies from manufacturer. So you might want to talk to the lab of the lenses that you use. Okay, so impingement. Okay, impingement's another thing. That's where the edge of the lens digs into the conjunctiva. It's also known as toeing, where you have the toe down. It's not always obvious and may not even be uncomfortable because the conjunctiva is spongy and the lens is not moving. You will look for what we call pillowing of the conjunctiva over the edge of the lens. That is, it'll kind of rise up and billow up like a cloud over the edge. The patient may be comfortable during wear, but will tell you that when they remove the lens, they see a ring. they see an impression ring. And actually, we've had some fun on some of our Facebook pages saying, well, what do you think of this fit? What do you think I ought to do? And people will talk about it and give suggestions and so forth because they see this edge and they interpret that as the lens in the eye. And then we laugh. We say, well, ha ha ha! It's not really a lens. It's a impression mold. And some people get it. I've done this, and some of my friends get it and say, well, I don't think that's a lens. So, but you do see a definite ring. So you got to fix that. And the other thing is we always want to remove our lens at follow up and stain the cornea and look for areas that may not be obvious. So here's an example. I've made a lot of mistakes, so I can show you all my mistakes. So that's impingement. And you can see where you see that kind of billowing, that kind of shiny area there. You can see that it's injected. The conjunctiva is injected right at the edge of the lens. So that's kind of digging in. And I can't deny the OCT showing that picture. But this patient wasn't bothered by it. Didn't bother him. He didn't care. But still, you got to fix it. So we flatten the haptic. If you consider a toric, which I would anyway, but maybe increase the toricity. And now a lot of lenses are coming into quadrant specific haptics, which means 4 meridians. And those are good. I find that we can overuse them. I don't jump on them as my first lens because you do want some tear exchange. It's not critical that we totally align in every single meridian. In fact, the very, very large lenses, the early Scleral lenses that pioneers like Don Ezekiel and Ken Pullum and Rentz Visor used, they're 21, 23 millimeter lenses, and they're actually a spherical haptic because there's so much toricity that far out, they just didn't align and you needed some tear exchange. So in a larger lens, like maybe 18 to 20, you may want a quadrant specific haptic, but be careful because when you start changing those, you change one thing and something else can arise. So you can kind of get into trouble. So unless the lens, there's some lenses that have quad haptics built in. And if I'm considering a quad, those would be the ones I would use first. Because they're the close, they already have the math worked out, so you're already close and not trying to figure it out for yourself. But I find for most of us, a regular toric haptic with 2 curves is adequate. So compression is kind of the opposite of impingement and less obvious to me, and that's when you're landing too close to the limbus, and that we call that healing. The opposite of towing would be like when you're coming down like this. And in these cases, the diameter is too small. You're not getting past the limbus, or maybe the haptic's too flat and you need to angle it and you need to come steeper like this. So that can be it. So similar picture, but there's our compression, you see. And maybe because the lens is decentered too a little bit, although in this case, it looks like it's good centration. So these are from Synergize, and I got Christine's sense and permission to use them. So this is their lens, and you can see in the upper picture, you can see that obvious healing where the heel is down. And then if you look on the bottom right, you can see that shadow. If you look at the very edge of the lens, there's a gray brown shadow, and that's caused by the edge of the lens lifting up, and you're seeing the light go over it. So that, and when they're healing, when the edge is elevated like that, your patient will definitely complain. And they'll tell you they feel the lens, and the lens will move more, is true. So you don't want to land on the limbus, and that's what you're seeing in the top picture. You want to get, about 1 millimeter beyond the limbus, as in the bottom picture. So again, that's important. So again, from these are Chris Sense pictures. On the left, you see the toe down where it's kind of digging in. The middle picture is just right. And on the right picture, you see heel down. And again, it's less obvious. The picture on the right and the middle don't look that much different. Although you do see some blanching. If you look at the middle picture, you see that the blood vessels are rather uniform under the haptic. And if you look on the bottom right, you'll see that it's very, very white. and that can be some compression going on. So what do? You make it a little bit bigger. You maybe make the mid peripheral zone bigger so the limbal curve is out farther, okay? And you steepen the haptic or increase the angle of it so that you're not going like that, you're going like that. It's frustrating though. So here's something that's very, very well aligned. You know, it looks like the lens is not even there. Same thing here, nice uniform white. And this lens is decentered a little bit. If you look at it, it's down a little bit, but not excessive. And it's not that big a lens either. So that's really not a problem. Now, midday fogging. Now, this is a big one. We get this all the time. In fact, a good friend of mine, Dr. Maria Walker, is at the University of Houston College of Optometry getting a PhD in this. She's been researching this for years. It's very, very frustrating. It's found in, you know, maybe up to 40% of contact lens, scleral lens wearers have to take them out, 50% maybe. And they have to take it at least once a day. And taking it out and refilling it may help temporarily, but some people feel like it doesn't really help, that every time you reinsert it, you irritate the eye further, you get more mucus. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. Now, I have seen people that if they stick with it, if it's not that bad and the lens is fit well, that will subside. The eye will adapt to that. And so midday fogging can go away. It's an adaptive response, but if not, you need to address it. You have to make sure, however, that when a patient comes in and says maybe it's fogging or their vision gets blurred, make sure that it's post-lens tear layer, tear debris. Make sure it's not microcystic edema. And so, of course, that's where you have Sattler's veil. You take the lens off and you have them look at a light source. And if they see halos and rings around things, that's probably edema. And so you need to, you know, check your clearance, check the decay of the lens, make sure you're getting enough oxygen. The other thing you have to look at is where is it? Is it on the anterior surface? Is it just lipid deposits? Or is it truly in the fluid reservoir here? So these are lipid deposits. Okay, that's not midday fogging, and that comes from meibomian gland dysfunction. So this person needs, you know, heat mask, scrubs, maybe fish oil, you know, omega-3s, maybe needs omega-3s. Okay. So this is midday fogging. You can see that kind of gold refractile stuff, and this is what Maria is trying to analyze, or for a PhD, is what is all that stuff. But a lot of proteins, a lot of inflammatory cells. Okay, so what is it? Well, the haptic not aligned. It all goes back to the haptic. The rocking of the lens stimulates it. Pumping action, like we talked about, creates not only bubbles, but it puts debris in underneath the lens. But rule out giant papillary conjunctivitis, or GPC. I'm old enough that we had traditional soft lenses, you know, in the early 80s when I was in school and in practice. And they would, you know, people would keep a soft lens for 2 or 3 years. It would have a bunch of debris on it, irritate the palpebral conjunctiva, and you get giant papillary conjunctivitis. With disposable lenses that most all of you on this talk, attending this talk, have grown up with, we don't see that much because they throw the lenses away. But scleral lenses they keep, and they're large, and they are well up underneath the lid, and they can stimulate giant papillary conjunctivitis. So if you're trying to troubleshoot fogging, make sure to avert the lids and look for signs of GPC. On the other hand, we talked about being too loose and letting in debris, but the lens may be too tight as well. So epithelial cells can turn over rapidly. They do turn over, as we know, and they get trapped underneath there. And so over time, the post-lens tear layer, or the fluid reservoir, fluid layer, becomes turbid. So it can be too tight too. So here's an example of being too tight. You can see the debris. If you look on the optic scatter, if you look in the pupil, you can see a lot of debris. So we loosened the fit. a little bit, and now we got some flushing action. So the lens can neither be too tight nor too loose, but you want to try your best job you can. So you can reduce the midday clearance, central clearance. Oblate designs where you flatten the base curve can be very, very helpful. Toric haptics, at least 150 microns difference. Sometimes reducing the diameter helps. We talked about viscous solutions and just trying to get good alignment. This is a real good article that was released just a couple of years ago. Let's see, almost 2 years, well, 2 years ago this month in June, by some people at University of Alabama. And I know most all these people, great research, and they found that leukocytes were, inflammatory cells were found in the post-lens tear layer in cases of fogging. And they liken this to too much clearance on the lens. And with too much clearance, you got decreased oxygen. This was an inflammatory condition, led to leukocytes. So they found that, every 50 micron increase of central clearance of the lens over about 250 microns gave us 2.24 times higher odds of post-lens tear fogging. So I thought that was very interesting. And of course, they recommended that you keep the central clearance around 200. That depends on the lens. Like this one, I wouldn't say this is bad. 230 microns is not an excessive layer of clearance, but this person had fogging, and it was eliminated by bringing the clearance down to about 143 microns. So for most lenses that I would be using between 15 and 17, I'm looking for 150 microns to 250 microns of clearance. I pretty much want to be on that range, in that range. So some other good friends of mine, very, very smart people, released this just in March in Contact Lens and Anterior Eye, which most of you know are familiar. That's the journal of the British Contact Lens Association, British Contact Lens Association. And they went through, it's a very comprehensive article. It's very, very good. I highly recommend you reading it. They go through all these different issues of inflammation and fit, and all the different factors, mucus, debris, oxygen. And they found there's just a variety of factors. There's no one thing that they can point to. So it's something that we all have to work on. But don't forget also, in trying to deal with this, forget dry eye. Many of these people are atopic. If they're on glaucoma drops, that'll give them dry eye. These people can be very, very sick. So they have a variety of conditions. So look for meibomian gland dysfunction. Give them a heat mask. If they have a lot of debris, if their glands are clogged or inspissated, uncap them, do some in-office expression. Eye wash in the morning is very good. You can get, this is probably overkill, but you can get a sterile saline rinse. And in the morning, ask the patient when they get up to use it and flush out the debris from night. I don't know about Nepal, but in Texas and the Gulf Coast, we have a lot of allergies here. So mast cell stabilizers are very good drops to use, and they're safe to use. Okay, a couple more things. Winding up here. Conjunctival prolapse, and that's where you see the conjunctiva draping up over the limbus. Some conjunctivas are just more loose than others, especially as people get older, tends to be redundant. You'll see this more often in larger lenses, which have a lot of limbal clearance, or decentered lenses for obvious reasons. So here's a case that we have. Now this is mild, right? And I've been told by experts who've been doing this a lot longer than I have, that you can see this in up to 20% of cases, especially in the larger lenses. So my rule of thumb is I always take the lens off and I look at it, and in the vast majority of the cases when you do that, it'll just fall back down. If it doesn't, if it remains adherent, that may be a problem, especially if it's getting neovascularization. You don't want that. But in most cases, I wouldn't worry about it. I'd watch it. It's caused by a sucking action, we think. If you have too much clearance, then the conjunctiva is sucked up in there, and can be a problem. Okay, the long-term effects are unknown. As I said, most of the time it'll just fall back. and like we just talked about. Okay, so you can make it smaller, you can reduce the limbal clearance, and again, referencing Maria Walker, maybe no more than 100 microns over the limbus. And I think that's a good rule of thumb. You can be close to the limbus. You don't want to touch it. We don't want to land on it, but you don't need excessive clearance over the limbus. In fact, the less clearance, the more oxygen it's going to get, which is healthier. Okay, we'll talk a little bit. We'll finish up with higher order aberrations. You know, that this is subject that's very, very complicated, and we're just getting a handle on it. We all have aberrations. Some are positive, some are negative. With keratoconus, obviously, you're going to have a lot of aberrations. And, you know, conventional sclerals will correct about 60 to 65% of the aberrations, because the scleral lens will deal with the anterior aberrations on the anterior cornea. We don't have a handle on aberrations on the posterior cornea, except to try to ameliorate them or build that into the lens itself. So higher order aberrations are not something that's static. I mean, coma increases with age. You have irregular stigmatism. Scarring causes that, scatter and glare. Pupil size has a lot to do with higher order aberrations, and even accommodation. So a lot of different things. You know, most of you, all of you, are familiar with Zernike polynomials. And, you know, we correct the second order. We correct sphere and cylinder and prism. Third order, trefoil, coma, and then you have your higher fourth order quadrifoil and all that. In keratoconus, mostly what we're trying to compensate for is vertical coma. That's the most common aberration that we see in scleral lens patients. And a number of labs are working on this, and this is what it looks like kind of in 3D. Higher order aberrations caused by scarring. In fact, they're really not even higher order aberrations. Like this RK patient, which I fit as well as I could. I had a well-centered lens. I had even clearance. You can see that if you look in the pupil in the left, you see some scarring in the pupil. And then, of course, she has a lot of radiokeratotomy scars. So some of this is higher order aberration, but scarring creates scatter. And we don't have a remedy for that at the present time. This is the same eye. You can see it's a well-fit lens, but she only had like 20/30 vision. What would that be? I don't know, 6/8 or 6/10 vision, something like that. And this is why we can smooth out the aberrations on the anterior surface, as you see with the scleral, but we don't have anything to do with the posterior. And so these RK scars went so deep, there was a lot of irregularity there. And there's only so much you can do about it. So what you can do is just fit the lens as best you can. Center it. Try to center over the line of sight. You can ask your lab if you can change the eccentricity, or that's the rate of flattening of the lens. And of course, we all know that's different than base curve. It's how quickly the lens flattens. And then, several labs that I'm working with, and maybe some you're working with, are trying to get a handle on putting these corrections of higher order aberrations into their lens. But there's a lot going on there. So that's what I have to say about that. Thank you for listening. I've had a great time. These are some of my contact information, my email, my Instagram. I'll invite you all, if you're not already a member, to join a Facebook page that Melissa Barnett and I host, and Nate Schramm, called Scleral Lens Practitioners. It's on Facebook. You do have to apply and answer a few questions. So please do answer all the questions. And it's a very, very good account. And we share a lot of knowledge there. So with that, I'm just going to see if there's any questions. Should I stop sharing my screen?
There is one question, sir.
Okay.
Question is, what consideration should we take during anterior videography? Is it different from anterior photography?
No, it's really not. The lighting and the focusing and everything is really the same. So you just switch the camera. No, it's not really any different. Although I tell you not to make them too long. If you're going to take a film, a video, I'd keep them to like 10 to 12 seconds, not much longer than that, because if you go for 20, 30 seconds or more, the file is too big and you'll have trouble uploading it or sharing it. You'll have to put it in Dropbox or something. So, 10 seconds usually will give you all the data you need. I'd rather take 2 or 3 shorter duration than a long one.
Well,
good question.
I guess this is the only question we have as of now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's great. Well, I hope people enjoyed it. They're free to write me, and
yeah. So is there anything else you want to cover before wrap up?
No, I don't think so. Can't wait to come to Nepal. Let me know when the restrictions lift. I'll come visit.
Yeah, sure. So next session, next conference you'll definitely have to come to Nepal.
Okay. Well, I hope so. I apologize for the hearing issues I had earlier, and I hope that didn't impact the presentation so much.
No, it didn't. So before ending today's session, I would like to thank and express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Thomas Arnold and all the attendees. I am also grateful to Mero Eye Foundation for providing me this opportunity to host this program. So I would like to end this session requesting all of you to drop your invaluable reviews and feedback. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
I made you the host again.